Netcode. It's the prediction software that makes online games possible, but that doesn't mean it always works though. Netcode is one of the dark arts of video game development. Effectively, what netcode is, along with handling the connection between the players and the server, it also is a prediction software that tries to use the last few seconds of data to predict where you will be in a quarter second's time or a half a second's time. This theoretically counteracts the lag that players might experience between each other, meaning the server sees everything at the same time and therefore can predict everything back at the same time for the players, no matter where they are in the world and how strong or weak their connection may be. Sadly, as you can see from these examples, that isn't always the case. If you're a fan of Revz-A-Lot, you've undoubtedly seen I Love Racing Games. They suck. This excellent video highlights a lot of the deficiencies that you see across the racing game genre.
Believe it or not, this is one of the world's most acclaimed and best-selling racing games.
From R-Factor to F1 to AMS2 to iRacing, they all have the same or similar issues, which is especially surprising considering how many of these games have an esports focus and have for the last 5 or so years. So imagine my surprise then when I found some of the best netcode the racing genre has to offer in a very, very unlikely place. Now, I know what you're thinking. Forza Motorsport's Revz, that's your idea of a good game with good netcode? This thing's an appalling heap of junk built from the ground up, blah 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 blah. Look, you're not wrong. The single player in Forza Motorsports is appallingly bad. The AI is stupid and dim-witted, the upgrade system makes no sense even after all the patches to unfuck it. But as a pick-up-and-play online racing experience, this game is really freaking good, and it took me a really long time, nearly 5 hours of gameplay, before I understood why. I couldn't put my finger on it because it still has all the normal issues that a Forza game has. Braking is greatly exaggerated, the steering feels heavy and slow, it's like your driver just won't turn the wheel enough to get the car through a corner. Because of the focus on car building and tuning, every single car class has a dominant car that just cannot be beaten. But as you're sprinting down to turn 1, ready for the first corner melee that always happens in a public racing game, what you'll find is the way the game deals with contact and it deals with the physicality of racing in a pack like this, it's better than any game I've ever tried. If you think about iRacing's netcode, which is sort of the gold standard of racing games, it's fantastic up until the cars are less than a foot away from one another. And when they touch or when they get very close to touching, the game overreacts. It increases the force that both cars will feel, which often causes more damage and normally one of the other drivers to lose control. But here in Forza, everything seems proportional. Even that GTR that knocked me off the track, that is something I kinda expect would happen in real life if someone shoulder checked you mid-corner. It didn't send me spinning off into the gravel, it didn't send him plowing off into the gravel with me. It was just a small bump where the cars didn't get stuck together, and we can both continue racing despite being completely on different sides of the planet thanks to the internet. And unlike iRacing, and unlike AMS2, and unlike all the other sim games that people normally gravitate towards, that's what I found myself doing more often than not. I was racing. I wasn't afraid to get up close to another car while trying to pass. I didn't have to worry about just barely touching somebody in the braking zone and them going spearing off the track and me ruining their day. I didn't have to worry about the netcode screwing up something that I, as a driver, could perfectly well screw up myself. Thank you very much. And that is an incredibly freeing feeling when it comes to playing a racing game, because in just about every other game minus Wreckfest, you're going to find yourself very, very timidly trying to get around people, because if you do make contact or if you do get close to one another, you're going to cause a really big accident. I would have to imagine the reason the netcode is so good in this game is because it's not having to calculate everything that would otherwise have to be calculated in, say, an iRacing. There is no damage as far as I can tell in Forza Motorsport. So it doesn't have to determine how much horsepower you lose, which way your wheel is knocked out of alignment. It doesn't have to worry about how much of your wing is gone after being rear-ended by somebody. In that sense, it's less a simulator like the games I've been comparing it to versus, say, a PGR. But I don't really think that matters. I've talked before about how people use the word simulator a little too seriously and how they sneer at anything that is even remotely simcade. Yet, here's a perfect example of a simcade game doing something that the simulators cannot, and that is simulating the wheel-to-wheel racing that you often see a little bit better than most of the other contemporary big games right now. So here's the question I want to leave you with. Do you think that maybe Forza Motorsport should have launched as a spin-off title in a similar vein to GT Sport? I know GT Sport was maligned by its fan base because Gran Turismo has always been a single-player focused game, and Forza has too. But if this game was called Forza Online, they just completely removed the entirety of the single-player campaign career, whatever you want to call it, got rid of the car upgrade system, created a slightly more homologation style set of regulations for a lot of the car classes. If they made this a online focused racing game, would people have been mad about that? Because that's what this game does best of all. That is what this game does better than pretty much all of its other competitors right now. I really feel like in this case especially, the single player element of this game is what is holding it back. It's what people play, they see it's crap, and they shelve the game and never try it again. Of course, that's talking about new buyers and people who buy the game today versus people who bought it a year ago when pretty much everything was broken. I'm a little bit conflicted on this conclusion because on one hand, I feel like that if Forza Motorsports was released today as a $50, $40 spin-off title that was mostly online focused, didn't have a single player, kind of like GT Sport was, I think people would really, really like it. But on the other hand, that's not what people expect from a Forza game. And this is one of those cases where the title of the game is what's holding it back. This game should not have been called Forza Motorsports. This game should not have been a reboot of the Forza Motorsports franchise. It should have been a spinoff. It should have been Forza Motorsports Online, and I think the vast majority of players would have been very, very happy.